When I was 26, I took a trip to San Diego by plane. I stayed with my friend for a few days and booked a late flight back home. My flight landed at midnight, and by the time I reached the ground transportation pickup point, it was around 12:30 a.m. I waved down a random taxi in the designated section and gave the driver my home address. He said he'd take me for $30 by, which was a great deal compared to Uber. He came out to help with my bag, but I insisted it was fine in the seat next to me. He placed my bag on the left side behind him. While I sat diagonal from him, he pulled up directions to my apartment, and we were on our way. My apartment was about a 30-minute drive from the airport with no traffic, which was expected at that hour. As we drove onto the highway, I noticed the driver looking at me through the mirror twice. The second time, he asked where I was coming from. I replied, San Diego. He said, "Oh, very nice." Then followed up with, "What were you doing there?" "Visiting a friend," I answered. He replied, "Is your friend as pretty as you?" I gave a short laugh, but I found the comment unsettling. It was only the third thing he had said, and it already felt to fall. But his questions stayed on the flirty side, like, "What is a pretty girl like you doing traveling alone?" I answered sassily, "Well, I just said I was visiting a friend." He rebutted, "But you're flying alone, so you're traveling alone." "We can agree to disagree," I said. He laughed and said he was teasing, but he had to be at least 45, and him hitting on a solo girl in her 20s was unsettling. As we drove on, I noticed we were passing a familiar overpass near my exit, but he didn't slow down. "Bah," I said, "this is my exit," as he was about to miss it. He zoomed by it and apologized, saying he'd take the next one. I tried to see if he had the right address on his screen, but it was tilted away from my view as the next exit approached. I loudly repeated, "You need to get off here." Without acknowledging me, he turned on the blinker and exited. Pick. He glanced at me through the mirror with what felt like annoyance. Then he asked, "Do you have a boyfriend?" I immediately replied, "Yes, he lives with me." He looked at me again, probably noting how fast I answered. "What's his name?" he asked. That was it for me. I told him I was going to put my headphones in. I popped in my AirPods, even though they were nearly dead, just to end the conversation. I texted my family and close friends about the creepy taxi driver and shared my location. Prone. My older brother replied he lived 2 hours away. He told me to get out if I felt threatened. We were back in my town now, stopped at a red light. I saw his eyes again through the mirror glaring at me. I had no music playing, so I know he said nothing, but his stare was intense. The light turned green, but he didn't move. I had to tell him the light was green. He finally drove again. We stopped at another red light. I noticed a police car parked in an empty lot. In a snap decision, I grabbed my bag, opened the van door, and ran. He shouted, "What are you doing, pyre?" and tried to close the door using the power button. But I forced it open and ran toward the police car. Instead of chasing me, he drove away. When I saw him leave, I slowed to a fast walk to the officer's car. The officer rolled down the window, and I told him the taxi driver was giving me bad vibes. I asked if he could take me home. peas. He agreed. We reached my apartment in 5 to 10 minutes. I went inside, brushed my teeth, and got in bed. Just as I got in bed, there was a knock at the door. What if it was the taxi driver? He had my address. What if he wanted money or work? The knocks continued. Then stopped. Then started again. I never left my room. The door was locked. That's what mattered. The next day, at work, I got a call from my neighbor George. He said my dad had been. They're trying to drop something off, but didn't he have a key? I said I hadn't heard from my dad. George said he saw him looking through the windows, but didn't leave anything. I called my dad. He was at work. He hadn't been near my place. I told him everything. He wanted me to come, stay at his place for a few nights. I agreed, but needed to pack first. After work, I got home around 9 p.m., did some laundry, and packed. Something felt off. I never usually got nervous being alone, but that night I felt watched. I heard faint creaks, like footsteps, but I couldn't pinpoint the location. I brushed it off. I was probably spooked from the night before. Just as I was ready to leave, I heard a creaking sound from the spare bedroom. Then a voice said, "I wasn't going to hurt you." An arm appeared from behind the wall. I bolted. I ran to my neighbor George's door, screaming and pounding. He and his wife rushed out. We called 911 and waited for the police. They searched the apartment. Back sliding door was open. He likely fled through the backyard. Unfortunately, I had no taxi record, no cab number, no plate only. A description, a yellow minivan, and the man's appearance. I described our route and the time. I grabbed my packed bag and went to my parents' house for a week. My dad later helped install security cameras, and I bought a taser. I've moved twice since then. Never had to use the taser, but I avoid taxis now, especially alone. Was he even a real taxi driver? I still wonder